Howdy peeps, been a little while since you've seen my lovely little mug on the old interwebs. Before I get too carried away actually, I did talk about doing another video regarding just the state of things, and yeah, this isn't what this video is going to be about. Look, I get it. YouTube don't like MGTOW. A lot of people don't like MGTOW. Good. What kind of cracks me up is the reasons they don't like MGTOW. Men going their own way. Men just deciding, you know what, done, enough of this shit, right? Because that's all that is on offer by today's standards. We don't, you look at the ridiculous standards that women in 2020. I mean, all right, riots and all that aside, sorry, peaceful protests and all that aside, it's like, it's just that thing, innit? When you do right, no one remembers, but when you do wrong, no one forgets. You could argue that is, in fact, just the way humans are, they're only remembering the bad things. And when we look at the state of a society now, let's talk about the dating market. Reality is, the women expect so much from guys, it is literally unrealistic. I don't think for 1 minute that there is literally one man, not one man, that can literally tick all the boxes on a permanent basis. I don't think it's possible. There's all sorts to take into consideration. I mean, there's a standard sort of thing, the 3 6s, 6 foot, 6 pack, 6 figures. Sure, not every woman is going to go by that standard, but nonetheless, they do expect. I don't know. I don't know what they want from us. I don't. I've had quite a few relationships, all different types. Platonic. I'm talking about obviously with women, like platonic relationships. And they all, they start off the same. It's all a new adventure, getting to know the new person and all of that. But you see, the conflict can usually start when there's a difference of opinion. And it doesn't necessarily, by that, I don't necessarily mean that either one is right over the other. It's just they just literally have differences of opinion. It doesn't necessarily make either one of them more righteous over the other, nor does it make them a better human being. It's one of these situations, and the difficulty in kind of like having that conversation, and then, for both parties to come away after having a conversation, it goes several different ways. Sometimes you might get an overly bossy partner, and whereas if you're not doing as they say, you're the bad one, and that is the end of it. And there's another way to look at that is out and out toxic, right? That's not a relationship I would say anyone would want to be in anyway. Reality is, a lot of guys do kind of lower themselves to that level. They will put themselves in that position of, it's better than not having anyone. Is it? I don't think it does, and I think there's the potential there for, a great deal of resentment building up from what I'm going to refer to as a kind of, not necessarily that they're weak, it's just that in some people it is a weakness, in others it's just more of a, like, they'll put up with so much until they can't put up with it anymore, and then obviously that's when a couple of things will happen. There'll either be a mass row about it, and they'll end up going their separate ways, whether they decide to do a bit of introspection and realise that at least one of them could have potentially been offering some constructive criticism. But I think more often than not, people are far too busy and far too quick to jump the gun and assume it's some form of personal attack when in fact it isn't, or it wasn't, or whatever the situation was. And I think this has been one of the sort of big problems that humans have anyway, not just on the sort of scale of relationships, in like not just interpersonal but romantic relationships in particular, since we are talking about men deciding that fuck it, it's not worth it anymore. And you can look at all this from several different perspectives. There's been relationships that I'm sure we've all seen our fair share of them, at least I'd like to think so. And we've seen different angles, whether they have kids or not. Like the chicks that I've been with that haven't had kids, and again, there's a whole different dilemma with that as well, which I'm going to talk about yet again because it's something that needs to be brought to the table. It's another reality, whether we like it or not. Regards options and dating market and everything else. But I think a lot of it comes down to, as I've said before, the sort of background of the individual. Obviously, a lot of kids have been brought up in single mother households, and however that the mother runs the house is however they run the house. Now, the disadvantage with that, I'll go into the not non-single mothers, just like a single girl. It comes down to how they were brought up. It is kind of relative because it's a reflection of, past events and current trends and all of that, right? Because it is a thing. And it's sort of interesting because one of the things that we get thrown in our face quite a lot is, oh yeah, you're all just basement dwellers, you live in mum's basement, this, that and the third. And it's like, I know a lot of the time it's just bullshit being thrown about online. But I sort of think about that, and it's just sort of like, because I consider myself part of the manosphere, regardless of how many people do or do not agree with what I say in my different videos. I am still a part of that. And it's like, the amount of times I moved in and out of my parents, I've lost count, for the most part down to relationships breaking down. That gives you an idea that I'm not an incel, obviously. Like I said before, it's like they think they're hard done by. No, I don't think you are. It depends what you want to miss out on, But I mean, realistically, like the person that you have a relationship with, I'm talking obviously in this aspect, romantic relationship, their views and their habits are going to be from the home that they were brought up in. So, for argument's sake, if you're dating a girl that's their mother was a feminist or is a feminist or whatever, and a lot of the time, let's face it, they are quite open about their, not necessarily a hatred for men, but just how oppressed they are as women in some circumstances. And then how bad the patriarchy is and man bad and yada yada yada. So already before, in this I'll use a sort of feminist mother and daughter, but the non-feminist daughter in this aspect, just for the sake of giving an example. So the daughter, when they go start dating guys, they're already going to have these little things, these little messages that the mother has been putting in, not necessarily deliberately, so in some cases it is, I'd say in a lot of cases it is, about how bad men are and we're all this, that and the third, when the reality of it is, as I've said before, it's like we're not. I'd say there's probably a large percentage of guys that actually were quite happy to make the sacrifices necessary for a positive relationship, one that works, one that is actually equal on both sides, and you're not doing anything to tread on each other's toes and all of that. Sometimes relationships do run their course. I get that. you know, it's as I've said before, it's a situation I've been in. You sort of get to the end of the line, and it's like one wants to go and do one thing, and you might want to go and do another, and so as a result, you know, there's no meeting in the middle on that one. And as sad and upsetting as it may be, it is what it is. So then we move on to, because that's one type of girl that you might meet, and sure, it's like, because I know people are going to be like, oh yeah, well, not all women are like that. It's like, well, no, they're not all like that, and I get that. Unfortunately, there's a larger, I would argue for a larger percentage of women that are. And for those that don't land in that category, you will also find yourself not necessarily looking for faults, but I'd say coming across faults, not finding faults either, because obviously fault finding, you're implying that there's something wrong with it there in the first place. So you sort of think, well, okay, you got that, and it comes down to the background that particular individual came from. And again, on the sort of male side of it, you know, if you've been with a potentially abusive mother, and I don't necessarily mean abusive in the sense of physically beatings or anything like that. I do mean just more in the senses whereas they themselves are toxic, and obviously it's one of them things. It's like, oh well, you know, no, they're not. It's like, no, there are plenty of examples of toxic women out there. You know, I think it's what Jordan Peterson refers to as the devouring mother. You know, the overbearing mother. But that's kind of one of them, and you know, toxicity, although it is, you know, quite rampant, if I'm honest, it's still a thing. Not necessarily a topic I'm going to go too in depth with on this particular video. But you see, then you got the other side of the argument, whereas a lot of feminists are arguing as, oh yeah, there's all these single mothers out there, and it's like they get treated differently, and blah blah blah, and you know how they're so strong and empowered, and it's like, really? Strong and empowered how? Strong and empowered that they make some shit decisions. That's the thing. We've all made shit decisions. You know. But the reality, I think what a lot of, I would argue maybe feminists don't actually see, is the further sacrifices that single men willing to get in relationships with single mothers, and the sacrifices they make. It's like, no matter, as has been said before, no matter how hard it is attempted, they can either be a really good mother and a shit partner, or a shit partner and a really good mother. Now, I know I'm saying the word shit and throwing it around there. I don't necessarily mean as in just absolute trash. The point I'm kind of getting at is the kids will always come first. Right? Make no mistake about it. You can't blame them. Right? It's for those that it's still applicable to, that mothering nature and nurture is still a thing. In a lot of cases now, whether they go on to meet potentially abusive partners, which there is always a chance for that as well, and I'm sure there's no shortage of it either. Whereas again, they make further bad decisions, and then there's the other side of all of that, right? And whereas they may not necessarily end up with a abusive partner, and again, I don't necessarily mean it in the sense of physical violence or anything like that. I mean it more in the sense of manipulation, emotional control, and this sort of a thing, which unfortunately is a thing in today's day and age. It's been more and more spoken about now, and I think it's kind of a good thing, obviously. But the reality is for guys, and you know, for these women that say, oh yeah, well, you should date single mothers. Why? Why would we want to do that? It's like we can barely justify dating your average woman, you know, because of their ridiculous standards, their for the most part, this is again something that we've seen a lot of. Their overbearing emotional outbursts. And again, this is a subjective scenario, but nonetheless. And then there's the other side to all of that, in whereas you have a potential for, I don't know, the sort of situation, whereas you're trying to raise a family, so to speak, and where the kids aren't yours. Well, your voice comes secondary for starters. So again, it's not really selling it. It's a bit kind of like, oh, so, and because this is just it, because it's the kind of expected, the kind of traditional values of family and all of that. Obviously, I've said a bit about certain groups wanting the deconstruction of the nuclear family, and it's like everyone thinks that that's some sort of race thing. It's not. Well, it is. It's just not. It's not blacks. It's whites. It's whites. It's whites that wanted from the start, from 100 and something years ago. They wanted the destruction of the nuclear family because they thought it'd be a good idea to go out and do as they please and do what they wanted, and of course not have any consequences for that. But that's a different topic for a different time. And like I say, when you sort of end up in that scenario, if you do, of being in a relationship and there's kids involved and they're not yours, and it's like, well, even if you go as far as offering constructive criticism, it can't be helped other than to take it personally, it seems. And more often than not, you'll probably find a situation where both parties are actually feeling pretty rubbish about the situation because one has one viewpoint on potential for how, not how to raise kids, but the sort of respect levels within that. And then the other will also have their view. And then to try and amalgamate your, coming from the perspective of a single guy, where you're just one person, and then you're trying to adapt your lifestyle into what is already a semi-constructed family unit. It doesn't matter whether there's 2, 3, 4, 5 kids. It doesn't matter. The situation is going to be pretty much the same. Someone needs to be the top dog, as it were, as far as the kids are concerned. They need to know who they're going to be answering to and all of that. And no matter how much you have the best intentions and the right goodness in your heart, there's always going to be those times when you get undermined. And this is what makes this whole dating in nowadays, in modern day 2020, a complete clusterfuck. I can't think of any other word to put it. And no matter how hard you then try and compromise, you're always going to be left with that little feeling of, not of resentment, but that of you're not being taken seriously, or what you say or what your opinions are don't matter because you're not a part of that family. You're an extra, right? Whether you're that extra that's being used to pay the bills, being used for sex, just to have a bit of company or something, And the situations are going to vary on that one. And nonetheless, when you do end up in those situations, it's just not good, because that's when you sort of start thinking, you take a step back and you look at the situation of that relationship and you sort of think, well, if you're not playing a very big part in the life of that, air quotes, family, because I'd like to think that guys that do end up getting in that scenario, that they're coming with the best intentions of being able to do better with that family, albeit that the offspring isn't theirs. And that's, as we know, You're Not My Dad is a favourite one of any stepped kid or whatever. You know, you're not my dad, you can't tell me what to do. Now, that's going to be one of them things that's always going to be on the cards. It's always going to be there, you know, even if they're saying it out of like they're not getting their way and it's just their best way to express their own anger and, I guess, their hard-doneness by, because perhaps you as a sort of, air quotes, representative father, your voice isn't being respected. And that's what it comes down to, you know, and you've got to seriously question as to whether that is, you know, a path you want to go down, whether it's just the single woman that doesn't have kids from any fathers, you know, and again, you know, trying to suss out who people are and what they're like and what they're going to be like, you know, 4 or 5 months down the line is a difficult thing, especially if, you know, you bearing in mind in the beginning you're only seeing each other for what, a couple of hours a week max. Bearing in mind that, all right, 2020 we got COVID and all that, but nonetheless, it will take a bit of time. Now, sometimes people are quite, you know, blasé about their shittery, and so it's easy to pick up on. Again, whether guys are going to be like, well, it's something for now, or would rather go without. I mean, in that situation, I would rather go without. You know, having someone that's all just a shit person. I wouldn't waste my time with it. So, anyway, that's just something I wanted to talk about in this particular video, because I haven't done much about why men go their own way in the different situations that men tend to face when they're in these relationships, you know. And yeah, that's it. Anyway, look, you know what? Thoughts, comments, and opinions, feel free to jot them down as always. Until the next one, stay cool, stay free, and peace out.